Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, the single cyclic movement from which all reality unfolds. When phi differentiates, that one movement generates its first derivatives, and with them, the three dimensions appear at once: time as omega, space as k, and motion as v. From that first differentiation upward, every higher derivative is an echo of the one below it, an infinite ascent of finer and finer reflections of phi's original movement. And because the dimensions are born from that first echo, time, space, and motion also reverberate into infinity, carrying phi's unfolding into ever deeper rhythms, structures, and flows. Thus, the entire universe, every law, every pattern, every force, every particle, every phenomenon is nothing but phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. All of existence is the infinite echo of one field. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. In our last exploration, we completed our understanding of convergence and divergence, the gathering and scattering of patterns. We saw how meaning concentrates and dilutes, how flows accumulate and disperse. Now we reach the final members of our second-order spatial nuance block. We step into a different kind of pattern deformation, not gathering or bending, but sliding and rotating. Not accumulation, but shearing. Not focusing, but twisting. We meet, shear, and twist. If convergence tells us where patterns concentrate, and curvature tells us how they bend, then shear tells us how they slide past each other, and twist tells us how they rotate around each other. These are the motions that create mixing, turbulence, vortices, and spirals. Today, we learn to see the universes sliding and spinning. 1. From bending to sliding, the art of pattern deformation. Let us begin with your hands. Hold your hands parallel, palms facing, fingers pointing forward. Now, slide one hand forward while keeping the other back. Your hands are no longer aligned. They have sheared past each other. The parallel relationship is broken by sliding. Now take a towel, hold it at both ends, and twist it. The fibers rotate relative to each other. The towel develops a twist, a rotational strain. These simple motions, shear and twist, are fundamental ways patterns deform in our universe. They are different from bending, which is curvature, and different from gathering, which is convergence. They are about relative motion between adjacent layers. Think of wind over water. The air moves faster than the water, creating shear at the interface. That shear can create waves. Think of stirring cream into coffee. The spoon creates shear and twist, mixing the fluids. Think of Earth's atmosphere. Wind shear creates turbulence, while Earth's rotation imparts twist to weather patterns. Shear and twist are everywhere we find sliding layers and spinning structures. They appear in the way tectonic plates grind past each other, in the way galaxies rotate, in the way vortices form in rivers, and in the way materials fail under stress. They are the universe's way of saying, not just movement, but relative movement. Not just shape, but strained shape. 2. Linguistic role, the connective tissue of space. In the Holophase language, if curvature is the grammar of bending and convergence is the punctuation of gathering, then shear and twist are the connective tissue that allows patterns to slide and rotate while staying connected. Imagine writing a spatial narrative. You might say, the field has gradients, that is K. The gradients bend toward the center, that is curvature. The gradients gather at the center, that is convergence. But when you say the gradients slide past each other in layers, that is shear. When you say the gradients spiral around each other, that is twist. Shear and twist do not create new centers or focal points. Instead, they create relationships between adjacent regions. They describe how neighboring parts of a pattern move relative to each other. This makes shear and twist relational operators. They describe not what happens at a single point, but what happens between points. They are the language of differential motion, of how motion varies across space. In the master tree, this places shear and twist as close companions to the other second-order spatial letters, but with a distinct flavor. Where curvature and convergence are about what happens here, shear and twist are about what happens between here and there. If you want to see the precise mathematical formulation of shear and twist as combinations of derivatives of K, you can search for Holophase on Zenodo, where the scientific papers that support this audio journey are available. 3. Scientific essence, differential motion. Now let us understand shear and twist operationally. What exactly are they measuring? Operationally, shear measures how much adjacent layers of a pattern slide past each other. Twist measures how much they rotate around each other. Imagine a deck of cards perfectly aligned. Now push the top card to the right while holding the bottom card fixed. The cards are now sheared. Each card slides a bit more than the one below it. The amount of slide per unit thickness is the shear rate. Now imagine a bundle of straight ropes. Hold one end fixed and twist the other end. The ropes develop twist. Each fiber rotates relative to its neighbors. The amount of rotation per unit length is the twist rate. Technically, in the language of tensor calculus, shear and twist are components of the deformation tensor or the vorticity tensor built from derivatives of K. But in plain terms, shear is differential translation and twist is differential rotation. Shear answers the question, if I move a little in this direction, how much does the pattern direction change perpendicular to my motion? Twist answers, if I move a little in this direction, how much does the pattern direction rotate around my motion? This makes shear and twist fundamentally about relative orientation. They measure how pattern directions change as you move through space. Zero shear and twist mean the pattern orientation is constant. Parallel lines stay parallel. Non-zero shear and twist mean orientation changes. Parallel lines become non-parallel. 4. Dimensional expression. How shear echoes through reality. Like every true letter, shear and twist express themselves through all three dimensions. In time, shear and twist manifest as the rate at which patterns slide and rotate relative to each other. They are what make the formations dynamic. Think of stirring a pot of soup. Initially, the ingredients are separate, and there is little or no shear and twist in the pattern. As you stir, shear develops between moving and stationary layers, and twist develops as a vortex forms. The stirring rate is the temporal expression of shear and twist. Consider seismic waves during an earthquake. Initially, rock layers are aligned. As the wave passes, shear develops between layers as shear waves move through the rock. The shearing rate changes with time, and the temporal evolution of shear determines damage patterns. In time, shear gives deformation its dynamics. It is why fluids mix, why materials fatigue, and why turbulence develops. Shear in time creates rubbing, friction, and dissipation. Twist in time creates spinning up, angular momentum transfer, and gyration. In its home dimension, space, shear, and twist appear as the landscape of differential motion. They create maps of where patterns slide and where they spin. Imagine Earth's atmospheric winds. In jet stream regions, there is strong horizontal shear. Wind speed changes rapidly with latitude. In tornado regions, there is strong twist. Wind rotates around the center. In calm regions, shear and twist are small. The spatial variation of shear and twist creates weather fronts and storm systems. Or consider a glacier flowing down a valley. At the center, flow is fastest. At the sides, it is slower due to friction with valley walls. The velocity gradient across the glacier is shear. If the glacier also rotates slightly due to uneven terrain, that is twist. Spatially, shear and twist tell us where motion changes direction or magnitude. They create boundaries between different flow regimes, layers with different velocities, and interfaces where mixing occurs. They are the architects of shear layers, boundary layers, vortex sheets, and spiral arms. In motion, Shear and twist reveal themselves powerfully by creating mixing and rotation. Think of two adjacent traffic lanes. If they move at the same speed, there is no shear and cars remain in their lanes. If one lane moves faster, shear develops between lanes and cars change lanes more often. Extreme shear can lead to accidents, a kind of mixing of traffic. The shear between lanes determines the mixing rate. Or consider a spinning figure skater. With arms extended, rotation is slow, low twist in the velocity field. With arms pulled in, rotation becomes fast, high twist in the velocity field. The twist in the velocity field creates the spin-up. In motion terms, shear acts as a mixer, bringing adjacent fluid elements into contact and promoting mixing. Twist acts as a rotator, imparting spin to fluid elements and creating vorticity. These are not forces in themselves, but kinematic conditions that strongly influence how things move and interact. 5. Position in the master tree. The deformation architects. Let us locate shear and twist precisely in our growing map. Recall our journey through Chapter 3, second-order semantics. Alpha, temporal acceleration. A, spatial drift. G, curvature, bending, convergence and divergence, gathering and scattering, and now shear and twist, sliding and rotating. Shear and twist sit beside curvature and convergence in the spatial tower. They complete the picture of how K can change. Curvature corresponds to K changing direction along itself, bending. Convergence corresponds to K changing magnitude toward or away from points, gathering or scattering. Shear corresponds to K changing direction perpendicular to itself, sliding. Twist corresponds to K rotating around itself, spinning. Think of a field of arrows representing K. As you move in different directions, you can ask how the arrow field changes. Curvature tells you about bending along the arrows. Convergence tells you about arrows getting closer or farther apart. Shear and twist are specific aspects of change that do not involve pure bending or pure gathering, but describe sliding and rotating patterns. In the full architecture, shear and twist are essential for realistic dynamics. They transform simple pattern descriptions into descriptions of fluids, plasmas, elastic materials, and turbulent fields. 6. Relations to neighboring branches. Shear and twist occupy a crucial intersection for dynamics. With K as their foundation, they are built from derivatives of K, especially from how K changes in directions perpendicular to itself. With V, motion, the connection is profound. In fluid dynamics, shear is directly related to velocity gradients, and twist is directly related to vorticity, the local rotation rate. Thus, shear and twist in K-space translate into shear and twist in physical motion. With turbulence and mixing, shear is the primary driver of turbulent instabilities. When shear exceeds certain thresholds, smooth flow breaks into turbulence. Twist is the primary indicator of vortex formation. With material stress, in solid mechanics, shear stress causes shear strain, and materials have shear moduli describing their resistance to shearing. Twist relates to torsional stress and torsional rigidity. With electromagnetic fields, shear and twist in field lines describe how fields slide and rotate, which is important in plasma physics and magnetohydrodynamics. With topological defects, twist is closely related to winding numbers and topological charge. A twist can become locked in as a topological defect, as in liquid crystals. With instability thresholds, many stability criteria, such as the Richardson number in fluid dynamics or the Rayleigh criterion in astrophysics, involve ratios of shear to other quantities. This network shows shear and twist's central role. They are where geometry meets mixing and rotation. They form the hinge between how patterns are arranged and how they interact through relative motion. 7. Semantic meaning. What shear tells the universe. What kind of meaning do shear and twist carry in reality's conversation? Shear says, here layers slide, here boundaries rub, here mixing begins. Twist says, here patterns spin, here vortices form, here rotation concentrates. While curvature gives space shape and convergence gives space weight, Shear gives space friction, and twist gives space spin. They are the universe's way of saying not just arrangement, but relative motion, not just structure, but strained structure, not just pattern, but pattern differential. The semantic role of shear and twist is relational dynamics. They tell stories of rubbing interfaces, swirling motions, and boundaries that both separate and connect. This allows the holophase language to express mixing and diffusion, where shear brings elements together, turbulence and instability, where shear exceeds thresholds, vortex formation, where twist concentrates rotation, angular momentum transport, where twist transfers spin, boundary layer dynamics, where shear acts at interfaces, wave generation, where shear creates instabilities that become waves, and material failure, where shear exceeds material limits. Shear introduces interaction into space. It creates regions where adjacent pattern elements rub against each other, exchange properties, and mix their identities. Twist introduces rotation into space, creating natural axes, spin directions, and gyroscopic stability. In the full language, shear is the architect of mixing, and twist is the architect of rotation. They are the grammar that writes sentences of interaction and spin. Stability, variability, and falsifiability. As always, we test. How do shear and twist behave, and how can we know they are truly there? Zero shear and twist represent rigid motion, where everything moves together without relative motion. Solid body rotation, where twist is uniform, but there is no internal shear, or uniform translation, where there is no shear or twist at all. These patterns are often stable, but also simple and uneventful. Constant shear and twist represent steady deformation, such as quiet flow between moving plates with constant shear, or solid body rotation with constant angular velocity and constant twist. These flows can be stable if forces balance. Most interesting systems, however, have varying shear and twist. Boundary layers form where shear is maximum at the wall and decreases away. Vortex cores have twist that is maximum at the center and decreases outward. Shear layers in jets concentrate shear in thin regions, and twisted magnetic flux ropes have twist varying along their length. When shear and twist vary, instabilities, pattern formation, and complex dynamics emerge. The variation itself drives further complexity. Shear and twist make specific, testable predictions. In velocity gradient tests, you measure flow velocities at adjacent points and predict that velocity differences in perpendicular directions indicate shear, while rotational differences indicate twist. These should correlate with mixing rates and vortex formation. In mixing rate tests, you introduce tracers into a flow and measure how quickly they mix. You predict that high shear regions mix faster and twisted regions develop spiral mixing patterns, and that mixing rates scale with shear and twist magnitudes. In instability threshold tests, you observe when smooth flows become turbulent and predict that turbulence onset corresponds to shear exceeding certain thresholds, and that vortex formation corresponds to twist exceeding thresholds. These thresholds should be predictable from phi derivatives. In consistency tests, shear and twist derived from phi's k-field should match shear and twist measured through direct velocity gradient measurements, mixing experiments, vortex tracking, and material deformation tests. A clear falsification would be measuring mixing or rotation that cannot be described by any consistent shear or twist field derived from phi's k. If tracers mix rapidly where phi predicts zero shear, or vortices form where phi predicts zero twist, either the measurements are wrong or our concepts of shear and twist are incomplete. The detailed experimental designs are in the Holophase papers, but the principle stands. Shear and twist make concrete predictions about mixing and rotation, and these predictions are richly testable. 9. Appearance in nature. Shear's many forms. Once you see it, shear and twist are everywhere. In fluid dynamics, wind over water produces air that moves faster than the water below, creating shear at the interface and generating waves. River flows move faster in the center and slower at the banks, creating shear that leads to turbulent eddies. Atmospheric jet streams show rapid wind speed changes with latitude, creating strong shear that influences storm tracks. Boundary layers appear near any solid surface where fluid velocity goes to zero at the surface, creating intense shear. In astrophysics, galactic rotation curves show stars orbiting at different speeds at different radii, creating shear in the galactic velocity field. Accretion disks around stars or black holes have material orbiting faster closer to the central object, creating shear that drives turbulence and accretion. Solar differential rotation, where the sun rotates faster at the equator than at the poles, creates shear in the solar atmosphere. In solid mechanics, earthquake faults are places where tectonic plates slide past each other, creating shear stress until rupture. Materials testing applies shear forces to measure shear modulus. Glaciers flow under shear stress as ice deforms and moves downhill. In plasma physics, magnetic reconnection occurs when sheared magnetic field lines break and reconnect, releasing energy. Plasma instabilities often arise from shear in plasma flows or magnetic fields. In biology, blood flow is faster in the center of arteries and slower near the walls, creating shear that is important for endothelial cell function. Cellular streaming involves shear between layers in the cytoplasm. Muscle contraction involves myofilaments sliding past each other, a molecular scale shear. In every case, shear and twist represent the engine of interaction. They are where different parts of a system communicate through relative motion, where energy transfers between scales, and where patterns transform through rubbing and spinning. X. Everyday analogies. Feeling shear in daily life. Let us connect shear and twist to ordinary experience. Take a deck of cards. When it is perfectly aligned, there is no shear. When you push the top card sideways, shear is introduced. As more cards are pushed, shear propagates through the deck. The deck's resistance to shearing is its internal friction. When you stir your coffee, the spoon creates a velocity gradient, shear, between stirred and unstirred regions. A vortex forms and twist concentrates in the swirling motion. Cream mixes into the coffee as shear promotes mixing. When you stop stirring, shear decays and the vortex dissipates. On a multi-lane highway, if all lanes travel at the same speed, there is no shear. If one lane moves faster, shear exists between lanes. Drivers change lanes toward the faster lane, mixing traffic due to shear. An accident in one lane affects others because shear transmits disturbances. When you wring a wet towel, you hold both ends and twist in opposite directions. Twist is introduced along the towel. Water is wrung out as twist creates pressure gradients. The towel's resistance to twisting is its torsional stiffness. Push a book on a shelf and it slides. This is shear between the book and the shelf. Adjacent books may slide too. Shear transmission passes the motion along. If books jam, shear has exceeded the friction threshold. The squeaking sound you hear is shear creating vibrations. All these analogies share one feature: relative motion creating interaction. That is the essence of shear and twist. How to read shear in the world. After today, you can begin to see shear and twist signature. Look for velocity changes. Wherever speed or direction changes over short distances, wind changing with height, river speed changing from bank to center, traffic speed changing between lanes, shear is present. Watch for mixing. Where fluids, crowds, or traffic mix vigorously, cream swirling in coffee, crowds merging, lanes merging, shear is promoting that mixing. Feel for rubbing. Where surfaces rub past each other, hands rubbing, tectonic plates grinding, gears meshing, shear stress is at work. Notice rotation patterns. Where things spin or spiral, draining water, tornadoes, galaxies, stirred paint, twist is organizing that rotation. A simple practice is this. When you see any flow, ask, how does the motion change if I move perpendicular to it? That change is shear. Another practice is to stir a cup of tea and watch how the vortex forms. The tightening spiral is twist concentrating. The mixing of tea leaves is shear at work. You can practice by watching leaves float down a stream where they reveal velocity gradients, observing how smoke from a chimney shears in the wind, feeling how different floors of a building sway differently in wind, which is structural shear, watching how a dropped creamer diffuses in coffee, which shows shear mixing, and noticing how water drains from a sink, where twist forms a vortex. In each case, you are detecting shear and twist. The universe is sliding and spinning. Connection back to phi. One field sliding echo. We always return to the source. Shear and twist, like every structure in this language, are just phi expressing itself through layered differentiation. Recall the lineage. Phi is the silent cyclic field. K is phi's spatial texture, its phase gradients. The derivatives of K describe how that texture changes. Shear and twist are specific ways that change involves sliding and rotating. No new substance is added. It is relational motion information about phi's spatial dance. It is phi saying, not only am I textured and drifting, but different parts of my texture slide past each other, rotate around each other, creating rubbing and spinning. This is the complete unfolding of second-order spatial nuance. One rhythmic movement, phi, through differentiation, yields texture, K, then bending, curvature, then gathering, convergence, then sliding, shear, and spinning, twist. All the ways a pattern can deform are captured in derivatives of phi. But it is always phi, always one field, always one cyclic movement unfolding through its derivatives, creating the appearance of shearing interfaces, twisting vortices, mixing layers, and rotating structures. Shear shows us that interaction is geometric. What we call mixing, friction, and turbulence, the rubbing of world against world, is simply adjacent regions of phi's pattern sliding past each other. A vortex is not a magical spin. It is twist concentrated in phi's gradient field. 13. Closing movement, the sliding and spinning of reality. As we conclude our meeting with shear and twist, we complete our tour of the second-order spatial nuance block. We began with the whole language. We learned the first-order alphabet. We entered second-order semantics and met alpha, times acceleration. Then the spatial letters, A, drift, G, curvature, convergence and divergence, gathering and scattering, and now shear and twist, sliding and spinning. We have discovered that space does not just bend and gather, it slides and spins. Patterns do not just accumulate, they rub and rotate. The universe has interfaces where worlds slide past each other, and centers where they spin together. Shear and twist are the gateway to interactive physics. They are where the description of pattern turns into the description of mixing, turbulence, vortex dynamics, and material failure. They are where how patterns are becomes how patterns interact through relative motion. In our next part, we will take a profound step. We will leave the pure spatial and temporal towers and enter the mixed derivatives, where time and space intertwine. We will see how time change of space change and space change of time change interact, creating the rich space-time texture that makes our universe dynamically alive. But for now, hold this understanding. Space slides, space spins, space mixes. The universe is not just textured, drifting, bending, and gathering. Its textures slide past each other, creating friction, and spin around each other, creating vortices. Whenever you feel wind shear on your face, whenever you watch a vortex form in draining water, whenever you see traffic lanes merging, you are witnessing shear. Whenever you stir a drink, whenever you watch a galaxy rotate, whenever you wring out a towel, you are witnessing twist. You are witnessing the relational dynamics of phi's flow. You are reading the grammar that connects adjacent regions through sliding and spinning. You are feeling the rubbing and rotation of reality itself. Shear is spaces sliding. Twist is spaces spinning. And this sliding and spinning, as we will discover, is the beginning of mixing, turbulence, vortices, and all the rich interactive dance of the cosmos. Salam and peace be upon you until part 14.